really the last day of the January 6th committee hearing, and they presented some evidence that Trump was not doing anything while this siege on the Capitol grounds was happening. You see the rioters are all over the place, and you can see they hung out Trump signs. To Trump about this, he seemed to think that they weren't his people, that they were Antifa. They're not Antifa, they're definitely Trump supporters. When you see this getting out of control like this, there's people have some explaining to do, like the Capitol Police. They did a pretty good job when there was violence, but I think there was a time where they just let the people come in. There are 14 or 15,000 people, and there are only a couple hundred, so they didn't have much chance to defend the place. But I wanted to show this because this is the end of the riot. This is what, at the time where Trump has issued his Twitter, and supposedly they all know that he said, go home. But look what happens. See what happens, because the January 6th committee said Trump didn't say anything. He didn't tell them to go home, so they rioted, and it was Trump's fault. But look what happened. This is what happens after Trump already has issued the tweet, and this is what happened.
John's reporter will be talking to him in a short while, but these are the images now in Washington, D.C. tonight. The president's message has been delivered. He's told people to go home. Some people have, but as we can see, there are plenty of people still around the Capitol Hill, still wanting to make their protests heard, still wanting to urge members of Congress not to ratify the election result. That's despite, by the way, Republican leaders on Capitol Hill saying that this protest is wrong.
In the last few minutes, the police finally started to use sound bombs and some form of tear gas, and you might be able to make out that they've cleared one level of the steps outside the Capitol building. Still lots of people still here, but they saw that there was so little security, they said. They felt it was easy to overwhelm that security, and they found themselves inside the building. They started knocking on doors. They entered into the chamber. But they said it hadn't been a plan, but they said they will continue to make their presence felt until the election result, they say, is overturned in a bid to do what the man they follow is telling them to do, which is to take back their country. This is what they translate that to be.
What else have people been telling you?
I think people are stunned, shocked, amazed. Clearly the security services have got some pretty tough questions to answer about why they weren't ready for what happened and what unfolded.
When he told his protesters in that clip we saw earlier to go home, would that for you be the moment where he kind of signaled that he knew that this protest is up?
Okay, so this is a scene from the riot, and this is by a journalist, and I want you to hear he's talking, narrating while he's looking at the riot.
The cops weren't prepared. They had to take turns with the masks to protect from their own tear gas.
Okay, so this is towards the end of the riot. You can see that they've cleared out the first level. There's no rioters up there. Trump has already issued his thing to go home. People are not going home. So look at what the police do. I'm going to let it go for a couple minutes, and you need to kind of zone in and see what the police are doing and how they're dispersing the crowd. It's not Trump's tweet. It's not Trump on video saying go home. They're not reacting to that. They are reacting to what the police are doing, which is flash grenades and tear gas.
But we have to compare this to the Black Lives Matter protests that happened in America over the summer and at the beginning of the summer, including here in Washington, D.C., and the way that protesters were dealt with by such a huge footprint of law enforcement outside the White House, clearing the way so President Trump could go on a stroll and conduct a photo op.
Complaining that, if this was an overwhelmingly black crowd, that they might be treated differently by law enforcement. I don't know if that's true, but it is kind of amazing that these people have now been allowed to stand here for 4 hours, a riotous mob in the Palace of Democracy, and have not been detained and removed.
Okay, so it's 4 hours. They were there at 1 o'clock. So Trump issued his statement to go home at 4. So this is an hour afterwards. So this is 5 o'clock. And what the police will be telling them is if you're there past 6 o'clock, you'll be arrested.
But there are still people hanging around up there who are not leaving. And you can imagine a scenario where there are obviously this is a stunning image that we're looking at right now, but where these folks are going to have to be forcibly removed.
Right now, Libby, it's definitely a lot calmer. I don't know if that's because of the curfew that's about to be enforced or being enforced.
Jorge, the big question everyone's asking is where has law enforcement been, right? Where was law enforcement throughout the day as the crowds were breaching barricades, getting closer to the Capitol, and ultimately breaking through into the Capitol? Talk to us about the police presence or lack thereof that you saw today.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thought I had early on when we got there, and even when the crowd was still mostly at the ellipse, I was looking at the barricades and the police that were at the Capitol, and remember thinking to myself, they are outnumbered. They're totally outnumbered. This is not enough police. And covering the protests in June, you saw a massive police presence. I mean, police, you saw units from outside the city, guardsmen, and a huge police presence for those protests. You did not see that in the earlier part of the day, especially when those mobs were breaking into the Capitol. Now, you're seeing it more now. As I was walking first on the west side and then on the east side of the Capitol, you saw a lot more units coming out, police officers dressed in riot gear, but that presence was missing earlier when they needed it there.
But really, there was not a sufficient police presence to keep the crowd out. So they first overwhelmed them at the outer barricade. Police then fell back to the steps of the east side of the Capitol building. And the crowd then overwhelmed them there as well. It came all the way up to the door of the Capitol where they began banging on the door. And some of them answered as well. We're still not completely clear on which doors the protesters who breached the Capitol came in through, but it did appear that a few went through the east door.
There was an anticipation, an expectation that the supporters of President Trump, after hearing him speak today, would migrate and move down towards the U.S. Capitol building. I knew that, you knew that, we had reporters stationed there. What was the law enforcement presence like as the crowds moved towards the Capitol?
In terms of the visible presence, I've been at a number of these protests now over the summer, and this was not a police presence that I think would strike me or anyone else who's used to seeing these things as particularly large. Clearly, overwhelmed by the crowd that showed up here. There's some thinking that the cold weather tonight might deter people, maybe some of them go home, but the pattern with every one of these protests that we've seen in the past is certainly that, we're entering the hours now where things do get a lot more unpredictable and where violence becomes.
James, when we see the faraway shot of the U.S. Capitol, it looks peaceful, it looks calm, and then as soon as we zoom in, we're hearing flashbangs go off. We're seeing this mob still not disperse. It is a half an hour away from the curfew time that the mayor has imposed.
Darkness is descending.
Yep.
And it's a terrifying. What we're watching live at the United States Capitol is police trying to reclaim control of the Capitol. It's a stunning image, and we've never seen anything like it.
James, the mayor, even before today, called for Washingtonians to stay out of downtown, right? To just stay out of this area, that there are still people sheltering in place in the United States Capitol complex who are not allowed to leave because of the danger that is perceived to await them. And even though that is happening, even though people are trapped in place, this mob is not being dispersed away from the Capitol building.
Yeah, you were mentioning earlier, Capitol Police or different people whose job it is will say, you need to put your ID on, you need to put your ID somewhere you can see it. I've seen Capitol Police yell at tourists for, taking pictures areas they weren't supposed to take pictures. And so it's stunning to watch this display here in what's supposed to be a heavily fortified facility, and what kind of message does that send? That they have not been able to regain control.
Let's go now to Carol Leonard, national investigative reporter. Carol, you cover the Secret Service, you cover security issues. I'd like to get your thoughts right now on what we're seeing.
Well, I think there are going to have to be a lot of answers provided by a host of security officials about what just happened at the U.S. Capitol. There's no way to sort of say this nicely. It's an unmitigated disaster to have a group of protesters pierce basically the bastion of our democracy. It's second only to the White House. When a jumper jumped over the fence and got inside the White House, a director of Secret Service lost her job. And it is just so striking that this could unfold in the way that it did. It's not like it was a surprise, Libby, that people were coming to protest the election at the encouragement of the president, but nothing about this was entirely unexpected, and it sounds to me like the Capitol Police, based on the reporting that I've done so far, was ill-prepared for the swarms that came basically at all sides of the building. People were breaking into windows and entrances that were not properly guarded. Some of them were locked, some of them were closed, but they were not being properly sealed off, I guess is the best way to put it. And when they were able to break through one window, a lot of people were able to get in. And very soon after that, one of the protesters was shot by, I think I'll stop there. It is, absolutely, Libby. And I mean, I remember after the shooting at the Capitol, when Denny Hastert, I believe, was the Speaker of the House, there were promises after that terrifying moment about how we were going to have a whole host of new security measures, and indeed it was beefed up at every entrance. But it seems as though the beefing up didn't prevent people who may have been brandishing weapons but weren't using them, so effectively unarmed, didn't protect, the Capitol from unarmed people, at least people not threatening to use arms, getting past that blue line. When he comes to the Capitol, what is the protection level? And I would say it's got to have been better than the level of force that was outside the Capitol today.
Oh, Carol, when I've reported on the State of the Union, I have had to go through extensive security procedures. The Capitol complex is locked down hours in advance.
Yes, and interestingly, right, it's on the day that the Congress plans to certify the election of Joe Biden as president and confirm for the world in a formal way that President Trump's tenure in the White House and in the Oval Office is over. It's interesting that on this particular day, a group is able to make its way in. That's why I think the comparison to the State of the Union is so interesting. If we're going to protect the president when he visits this chamber, are we going to protect democracy when it's unfolding in this chamber?
But what questions will you be asking, and are you asking, about the role of Secret Service?
And I did see it was cute that this Pomeranian showed up at the riot.
As the
I wrote a story that was in the Washington Post that was about the anxiety that many of Joe Biden's allies and supporters had about the Secret Service's current leadership and the current leaders of the presidential detail. There's always some change in the agents, change in the makeup of the agents who run a presidential detail when there is a transfer of power from one president to the other. But there's been a lot of anxiety that this group that's in charge now has some members who feel particularly politically aligned and loyal to President Trump. So there's a lot of anxiety on the Biden side about this group and their political loyalty to President Trump. As a result, the Secret Service has made some changes. They've added new people that Biden is familiar with to head up his detail. And we'll see in this transfer of power other changes that the future President Biden may make.
It is incredible to hear Carol talk about the security breach that happened here at the United States Capitol today, and just how unprecedented it was, James.
It really is. And our colleague Peter Herman, who covers DC police for us full time, is reporting that the DC police say that the woman who was shot inside the Capitol earlier today has died. Apparently no other details were provided. That's the first known death from this whole thing. And that is a reflection of just how historically unusual this is. A historian of Congress was saying that the last time that someone breached the Capitol this way was the British Army during the War of 1812, when they came and also burned down the White House.
James, the Virginia governor has issued a 6 p.m. curfew as well in some of the jurisdictions. In the Alexandria area, in the Arlington area, those are of course right outside of Washington, D.C. The governor also announcing he's issuing a state of emergency in Virginia, which will allow a continued response to take place. Adversaries of the United States have tried to attack this country. They have not managed to attack the United States Capitol building, and yet Americans themselves did it today.
Yeah, and when you take an oath to be in Congress, and you take any oath, Donald Trump took the oath too, you promise to protect America from all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Okay, so it's been about 45 minutes of the video going, and like the main level of the Capitol building was cleared about 45 minutes ago. Most of the people were outside. There's a lot of people on the steps. Now it's been 45 minutes. You can see there's a lineup of riot gear, policemen, and I believe those are coming from DC police, local police, and they've been called up. So, and then I believe FBI and Capitol Police are still involved in clearing and all the grounds of the White House. So we can see that here in a matter of 2 hours, Trump said go home. I would say maybe 10 or 15% or maybe 20% of them did leave at that point, but then 80% of them stayed. So 80% of the protesters, the rioters, stayed there for whatever reason. Maybe they thinking they're going to stop the vote. But finally, police did come. In retrospect, it's always hindsight to see the correct things that were done to clear the people. Now, if they would have had these people on standby, ready to go in a moment's notice, this never would have happened. If Capitol Police had done their job, if the DC police riot people were on standby and were able to get there, this whole thing would never happen. I kind of think this fiasco, it's a result of poor planning, poor strategic security around the Capitol grounds. The Capitol Police definitely failed. Even the journalists recognize that. Just terrible that this could happen in our day and age, that they were not prepared. I just can't believe it. And then to say in a January 6th committee it's somehow Trump's fault for not doing something, when I'm sure his fired up rhetoric added to the flames, but the security at Capitol grounds should have been much triple or quadruple. If they done it right, a whole thing would never happen. So that's my point.